Sometimes in life, and you don't know it at the time, someone gives you a push or a little nudge, and it sets you down a path that affects the rest of your life. Let me tell you what led up to that nudge and how it had an impact on the rest of my life, and a little bit about the person that gave me the nudge. For me, that man was Joe Floyd.
Joe Maxwell Floyd Jr. was born on April 7, 1930, in the small farming community of Askew, Mississippi. Joe was an only child. His family farmed 120 acres and raised horses, mules, milking cows, beef cattle, cotton, beans, and corn. There was a creek running through the farm, so when the weather was hot, young Joe would escape there and dream of his future. He wanted to be a pilot or a professional baseball player. He played sandlot baseball year-round and spent many hours playing catch with his dad. Joe was a natural athlete and leader, and during his first 8 years of school, he played softball, volleyball, basketball, and baseball. There wasn't a gym for the elementary grades, so they played unsupervised games on the playground. It's no surprise that Joe was picked to be the captain of the schoolyard basketball team. Joe graduated from Tunica High School. While there, he played football and was captain of the high school baseball team. Sports were proving to be a big part of his life. After high school, Joe played football on scholarship at Northwest, a junior college in Mississippi. He was also sophomore class president. It was around this time that the Korean War started, so Joe, looking to realize his dream of being a pilot, enlisted in the Naval Aviation Cadets. But he wasn't called for duty before graduating from Northwest. So he enrolled at Delta State College and played football. At the end of his first quarter, he was called to service and reported to Pensacola, Florida for duty. His first training flight was also his very first flight, and after that scare, he decided that being a pilot was not the best career choice for him. He left the cadets and enlisted in the regular Air Force, which landed him at Stewart Air Force Base in Nashville, Tennessee. Not surprisingly, he played football on the base team, and in 1951, he was transferred to Portland, Oregon. That transfer would be the catalyst for everything good in his life that followed, for it was there that he met Carolyn Lewis, the love of his life and future wife. The USO, of which Carolyn was a member, arranged dances for servicemen. It was at one of these dances that she and Joe met. As the story goes, Carolyn had a boyfriend, but after meeting Joe, she only had eyes for him. Now, Joe was brought up in a strict Methodist family, which meant dancing was frowned upon. But Carolyn loved dancing, and Joe loved Carolyn, so Joe learned to dance. In 1953, as the Korean War was winding down, Joe was honorably discharged and returned to Mississippi to finish his education at Ole Miss. He and true love Carolyn kept in touch by letters and the occasional phone call. Just before graduating, he saw a job ad for a PE teacher and coach in Kodiak, Alaska. On a whim, he applied. He was shocked when not long after he received a contract in the mail. Joe called Carolyn and said, "What do you think about Kodiak, Alaska?" Carolyn asked, "Where is Kodiak, Alaska?" "I really don't have the faintest idea," Joe replied. "Somewhere in Alaska." Wherever it was, it sounded adventurous, and the pay was excellent. Joe and Carolyn were married on July 20th, 1955 in Vancouver, Washington. Not long after, they packed up everything they owned and headed up the Alcan to their new adventure. They made it to Homer just in time to load their car onto the steamship that headed to Kodiak. 2 days later, they followed by plane, and soon after that they settled into a small apartment on top of one of the cannery buildings downtown. Joe settled in at the high school almost as soon as they arrived in Kodiak. Aside from his regular PE teaching duties, one of the first things he did was start an intramural program. He also started coaching the high school basketball team. In 1956, while still coaching basketball and intramurals, he found out that cross-country was being added as a high school sport. So he coached the cross-country team and track. And then, at the urging of some students, Ian Fulp being one, he started arguably one of the most storied wrestling programs in the history of the state.
I was a freshman walking down the halls with my best friend Ryan, just as wrestling season was starting, Coach Floyd stopped me and said, "You going out for wrestling?" I said, "No way. Those guys are big, older, nothing to do with it." But I got a little nudge. All he said was, "You need to go out for wrestling." I ended up wrestling in college for a few years and even played football there, just as a walk-on. What would have happened to me if I had not been pushed just a little to go out for wrestling as a freshman?
Although he was passionate about sports, he found his greatest joy in family. Somehow, in between full-time jobs, sports, and civic involvement, he and Carolyn found time to lovingly raise 4 children: Virginia, Max, Scott, and me, Patrick. Joe said that his children were the focus of everything he and Carolyn did. Taking trips with them, going to sporting events, he would tell us, "You know, your mom and I have always had 5-star lives, and that's what we wish for you." Not only did they wish it, they made it possible. He also told us, "Marry someone who will be your right hand, as your mother is to me. I love her dearly." Joe liked to say that his hobbies were sports, people, and family. But there was much more to him. Upon his arrival in Kodiak, he joined the Kodiak National Guard and helped grow it from 45 to 100 members, serving as its commander. He was an avid hunter and fisherman. In 1963, he shot a Boone and Crockett record bear in Coluda Bay. He also bagged a record moose. He loved his sheep hunting trips to the Yukon, Wrangell Mountains, Brooks Range, and British Columbia, and loved his fishing trips on the Karluk. He was a Rotarian, a member of the American Legion for more than 60 years, served 20 years each on the KEA Board, the Parks and Recreation Committee, and the Mission Board. Joe said, "When there was a need, I wanted to fulfill those needs, not because I was assigned them, but because I wanted to see things happen." He was steadfast in his faith and a proud member of the Community Baptist Church. For more than 60 years, he occupied the same row most Sundays if he wasn't out of town. Joe and Carolyn traveled a great deal, 15 trips on the Alcan included, to many high school and college sporting events of all kinds, all over the state and throughout the country. If you ask Joe why he did that, he'd simply tell you, it's what we do. They loved to travel to see their 12 grandchildren, to cheer them on, to be there for their big days, and sometimes the hard losses. And Joe always managed to turn his losses into wins. Although he never recognized his dream of becoming a pro baseball player, he was an all-star baseball coach. He coached the American Legion baseball team for 20 years and to a state championship in 1985. He was inducted into the Alaska Sports Hall of Fame in 2007. In 2012, it created the Joe Floyd Award for those who create a significant and lasting contribution to Alaska through sports. In 2013, he was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Joe said he felt blessed by the honor, but humbly felt that there were others as deserving. Of his awards, he joked, "It was because I had the keys to the gym." He may have held the keys, but he got everyone involved, whether they wanted to be or not. As a player, a parent booster, or a community supporter, Joe never let you say no. All you needed was a little nudge.
There's a lot of people here that responded to my push and my show and my aspirations and my hopes and my prayers for their success, and they did.
Coach always picked me to be captain in PE and to put a team together for intramurals. I didn't know it at the time, but I was starting to learn I could be a leader. I ended up coaching my kids in football, and hockey, and soccer, and basketball, and of course wrestling as they got older. And every year, at our end of the year banquet, I tell the story of how a coach stopped me in the hall and set me down a path that affected my whole life. What an opportunity Coach has given me to pass these basic values on to hundreds of other kids. To know I had an impact on them because one man made such an impact on me. And sometimes all that kids need is a little nudge to learn they can do things you never thought possible. And that message is something I learned in a hallway at Kodiak High School 44 years ago by a man I just call Coach.